Christmas Eve should smell of pine and cinnamon, not the stale tang of loneliness. I was 32, sprawled on my bedroom floor in a Chicago apartment I'd paid for, when my phone buzzed with a message that carved a hollow in my chest. Thank you for existing. Don't come. My father's words, sharp as a blade, glowed on the screen. I stared, willing them to blur, to soften, to mean something less cruel. Outside, snow dusted the city, and laughter from distant holiday parties seeped through the walls. But here, in the dim glow of dollar store string lights, I was an outsider in my own life, tethered to a family that had already written me off. I'd been carrying them for 18 months, my shoulders aching under the weight of their needs. Rent, $200 a month, wired from my account to keep the apartment we shared. Utilities, $200, because Emily, my sister, swore she'd pay me back when her next gig came through. Groceries, $500, stocked the fridge she raided without a thank you. I was the steady one, the one who worked overtime at a soul-draining office job, who sold my old gaming console to cover her student loans. Emily, 2 years younger at 30, was the family's darling, her chaos forgiven as creative spirit. I didn't complain. Family doesn't keep score, right? But that night, the scoreboard was all I could see. Hours before Dad's text, Emily had stood in the kitchen, tossing her coat over her shoulder like a movie star. Her blonde curls caught the light as she checked her reflection in the microwave door. She was headed to our parents' house for Christmas Eve dinner, a tradition I'd been quietly excluded from for months. Oh, by the way, she said, pausing at the door, if Mom and Dad ask, I told them you're just crashing on the couch. You know, since your name's not on the lease. Her tone was casual, like she was commenting on the weather. My hands froze in the soapy dishwasher, the sponge slipping from my grip. You told them that? I asked, my voice low but steady. She rolled her eyes, flicking a curl. Chill, Claire. It's not a big deal. I just didn't want them to think I'm letting you live here for free. Easier this way. I looked at her, the sister I'd propped up through job losses and late-night sob stories, the sister whose rent I paid while she bought new boots. But I'm paying the rent, I said, each word deliberate. Emily shrugged, already halfway out the door. Yeah, well, they don't need to know that. The door clicked shut, leaving me with the hum of the fridge and the weight of her lie. I dried my hands, the towel trembling in my grip, and sank onto a kitchen chair. The string lights flickered, cheap and fragile, like the bonds I'd been clinging to. Dad's text came later, around 9 p.m., as I sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through old photos to remind myself what family felt like. 6 words, no explanation, just a final seal of rejection. I imagined them at the dinner table, Dad carving the ham, Mom fussing over Emily, their laughter warm and complete without me. I'd been fading from their story for years, but this was different. This was a door slammed shut. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but no words came. What do you say to a family that thanks you for existing, then tells you to stay away? I set the phone down, the screen's glow fading to black, and let the silence settle. It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the ache of a truth I'd been dodging. I was paying for people who had already decided I didn't belong. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, its rhythm a faint pulse against the silence that had swallowed me since Dad's text. I sat at the table, the dollar store lights casting frail shadows on the linoleum, my mind a tangle of questions with no answers. How long had I been invisible to them? How many more years would I pour myself into their emptiness? The apartment, my cage of obligation, felt heavier than ever. Every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the rent I paid, the life I'd surrendered. Then, something snapped, not loud but clear, like a string stretched too far. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in months. In the hallway closet, buried under coats and forgotten umbrellas, was a toolbox I'd bought for a shelf I never built. My hands, steady now, closed around its rusted handle. The weight of it grounded me as I knelt by the front door, the lock's cold metal glinting under the bulb. Each turn of the screwdriver was a choice, each click a severance. I worked in silence, sweat beading on my neck, until the old lock fell away and a new one took its place. No hesitation, no guilt, just the quiet thrill of reclaiming what was mine. When I finished, I leaned against the door, the apartment lighter, as if it had exhaled a burden I'd carried too long. I crawled into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and slept deeper than I had in years. At 8:17 a.m., the sound of keys fumbling woke me. A scrape, a curse, then a pause. Emily was back. The new lock held firm and her fists pounded, each thud a desperate plea I no longer owed her. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just listened as the banging slowed, then stopped. Silence returned, sharper now, mine to keep. I rose, my bare feet soft on the hardwood, and prepared her eviction in my way. On the doormat, I placed 2 boxes, wrapped like Christmas gifts with paper I'd saved for better days. One, medium-sized, held the scarf and earrings I'd bought for her, tied with a perfect bow, my last act of kindness. The other, smaller, buzzed faintly, a phone inside set to vibrate with a looped alarm. Tucked within was a third box, unadorned, a credit card statement in my name, $750 in charges she'd made, and a USB drive with audio clips of her laughing about my gullibility. A sticky note read, "Your contract has ended emotionally and in every way." I shut the door, the latch clicking with finality, and felt the air shift. The apartment wasn't just mine now, it was free. I stood in the kitchen, reheating coffee, the mug warm in my palms. The pounding hadn't shaken me, it had solidified me. Emily's absence was a gift I'd given myself, wrapped in the courage I'd forgotten I had. I didn't know what she'd do when she opened those boxes, but I knew what I'd done. Drawn a line, not in sand, but in steel. The string lights still flickered, but they no longer mocked me. They were mine, like this space, like my life. For the first time, I believed it. The coffee was cold by noon, but I sipped it anyway, the bitter edge matching the memories that clawed their way up as I sat alone in the apartment. Changing the locks had cracked something open. Not just the door, but the truth I'd buried under 18 months of sacrifice. It started small, a grocery run here, a utility bill there, promises from Emily that she'd sort it out soon. I believed her, because that's what sisters do. But small became a flood, and I was drowning in her chaos, my life shrinking to fit her needs while she danced through hers, untouched. It began when Emily lost her graphic design job, or quit, she was never clear. "Just a rough patch," she'd said, her voice soft, eyes wide, the same act she'd perfected as a kid to dodge trouble. I picked up extra shifts at the office, my desk a blur of spreadsheets and late-night emails. Rent was $200, and I paid it every month while Emily scrolled through Instagram, planning her comeback. Utilities, $200, hit my card because she forgot to transfer her share. Groceries, $500, filled our fridge, though I ate ramen to stretch the budget. Her student loans, $10,000, loomed, and I sold my gaming console, my one escape, to cover a chunk. "I'll pay you back," she swore, her hand on my arm, but her promises were air, gone by morning. I gave up more than money. Trips to the lake, painting classes, even a date I canceled because Emily needed $300 for an emergency that turned out to be a music festival. I told myself it was temporary, that family sticks together. But temporary became routine, routine became obligation, and obligation became a silence I couldn't break. Emily had a gift for twisting things. Her tears turned her into the victim, me into the cold, responsible one. To Mom and Dad, she was the dreamer, her failures proof of a delicate soul. I was the rock, too serious, too steady, until steadiness felt like a sentence. 6 months ago, I stopped going to family dinners, not because I didn't love them, but because each one was a trap. Mom's voice, sharp over mashed potatoes. "Emily's just struggling, Claire. Why do you make it so hard?" Dad's sigh. "You're the stable one. She needs you." I'd nod, my fork heavy, my smile a mask. The truth was, I was tired of being the adult, the bank, the one who paid while they praised her. I'd drive home, the city lights blurring, and wonder when I'd become a stranger in my own family. 3 weeks before Christmas, I found the credit card statement, not mine, but in my name, opened with my ID and email. $750 in charges, a spa day, a tattoo at Ink and Needle, a Target haul. My heart pounded as I called the bank, their confirmation a gut punch. Emily's doing, linked to her phone. I didn't confront her. I watched, silent, as she pranced through the apartment in new sneakers, her Apple Watch glinting, laughing on FaceTime about her idiot sister who never notices. I took screenshots, saved voicemails, and built a case in the shadows. She thought she'd won, but I was done being her pawn. That afternoon, as snow fell outside, I sat on my bed, the statement crumpled in my fist. Emily's lies weren't new, but their scale was. She hadn't just taken my money, she'd stolen my identity, my trust, my place. I'd been shrinking to fit their story, but the locks I'd changed were only the start. I wasn't just locking her out, I was locking myself in, to a life I'd fight for, no matter the cost. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen blinds, painting stripes across the linoleum as I stood by the counter, the coffee pot hissing softly. The boxes I'd left on the doormat waited outside, their silent accusation heavier than the morning's calm. I'd locked Emily out, but the real confrontation loomed, a storm gathering in the pit of my stomach. Around 2 p.m. the door rattled, not a knock, but a fist pounding like it meant to splinter wood. I set my mug down, its warmth fading, and braced myself. The air thickened, charged with the truth I was about to unleash. I opened the door slowly, and there stood Emily, her blonde curls tangled, eyeliner smudged into dark crescents. She clutched the smaller box, its faint buzzing a taunt in her trembling hands. "What is this, Claire?" she screamed, her voice cracking like thin ice. I tilted my head, calm as stone. "A Christmas gift," I said, my words deliberate, cutting. She tore it open, the wrapping paper shredding to reveal the credit card statement, $750 in her charges, and the USB drive labeled "For Dad." Her eyes widened, but before she could speak, my phone rang. I answered on speaker, Dad's voice filling the room. "Claire, what's going on? Emily says you're harassing her. This is cruel." I laughed, a sound sharp enough to startle even me. "Cruel? You mean like telling me not to come for Christmas?" Dad snapped. "That wasn't about you. You've been cold, isolating yourself." I cut him off, my voice steady. "You told me not to come, Dad, and guess what? I listened." Emily lunged for the phone, her nails grazing my wrist. "She's crazy, Dad. She changed the locks." I pulled back, holding the phone high. "Oh, please, Emily. Why don't you tell him what's in that box?" Silence fell, thick and suffocating, as her face drained of color. I pressed play on the USB drive, plugging it into a small speaker on the counter. Emily's voice spilled out, clear as a bell. "She's so easy to manipulate. I could max out her card, and she'd still pay my phone bill." The words hung, undeniable, her laughter in the recording a blade twisting in the room. Emily stammered, "That's out of context." I arched an eyebrow. "In what context is stealing my identity okay?" Dad's breathing crackled through the phone, but he said nothing. The truth was a weight he couldn't lift. Then a soft knock broke the tension. I opened the door to find Mom, her coat dusted with snow, and behind her Tom, Emily's ex-boyfriend, his jaw tight with something fiercer than anger. "Emily," Tom started, his voice low, trembling with rage. "I got a call today. 2 Amazon orders, a hotel booking, all in my name. They demanded payment. It was you." Emily's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "Why would I do that?" she whispered, but her eyes darted to the box, the USB, the speaker still glowing red. Tom stepped closer, his gaze locked on hers. "I think you should go." Emily blinked, as if slapped, her usual tears absent. She had no script, no charm to wield. Mom's face crumpled, but she didn't speak, her silence louder than any defense. I tossed Emily's coat from the chair. "Your things are in the hallway, next to the trash. Figure out which is which." She didn't scream or beg. She just walked out, her footsteps fading down the hall, the elevator's ding a final note. I shut the door, the latch clicking softly, and leaned against it. The apartment felt vast, not empty but open, like a lung drawing its first full breath. Tom nodded at me, a quiet alliance in his eyes. Mom lingered, her hands twisting, but I didn't offer her words. The speaker hummed faintly, Emily's recorded laugh a ghost in the room. I'd torn down her lies, not with anger but with proof, and the weight of that victory settled in my bones. I was no longer their shadow. I was Claire. and I was enough. The morning after Emily's departure, I woke to a Chicago dawn, gray light seeping through my blinds like a promise of clarity. The apartment's silence was no longer a void, but a canvas, and I was ready to paint my justice. I sat at the kitchen table, a binder open before me, its pages stuffed with bank statements, screenshots, and audio transcripts. Evidence of Emily's betrayal, meticulously gathered. My hands, once trembling with doubt, now moved with purpose as I labeled each document, my pen's scratch a quiet rebellion. By noon, I'd filed a police report for identity theft. The officer's nod, a small validation of the war I'd been fighting alone. I found a lawyer by Wednesday, a woman named Karen with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice. Her office smelled of leather and coffee, the looped skyline visible through her window. I slid my binder across her desk, its weight a testament to 18 months of exploitation. "This isn't just about the $750 credit card," I said, my voice steady. "She lived off me, rent, utilities, emergencies. My parents enabled it." Karen flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing at the utility contracts co-signed by Mom and Dad without my consent. "This is long-term financial exploitation," she said, leaning back. "You've documented every dollar. We have a case, a public one." A week later, my phone buzzed with a call from Grandma Evelyn, her voice firm despite her 78 years. "Claire, I've seen your evidence," she said, her words cutting through the static. "Your father took $10,000 from a savings bond in your name to buy Emily's car. I've blocked what's left and moved the account to you." My breath caught, the betrayal a fresh wound. "I didn't know it existed," I whispered. She sighed. "I've rewritten my will. My house is yours. You'll do right by it." Her trust anchored me, a lifeline I hadn't expected. The courtroom, 3 weeks later, was a sterile box of fluorescent lights and polished wood. Emily sat across from me, dressed in plain jeans, her usual flair muted as if auditioning for sympathy. Mom wore black, her eyes avoiding mine. Dad just looked weary, his shoulders slumped. Karen laid out the evidence with surgical precision. Bank statements, audio of Emily's boasts, forged utility contracts, and the stolen bond. Emily tried tears, her sobs rehearsed, but the judge's face was stone. "Ms. Thompson," he said to Mom, "did you register your daughter's name on financial documents without consent?" Silence stretched, taut as a wire. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. The verdict came swiftly, a gavel's crack sealing my freedom. $15,000 in compensation, all fraudulent debts canceled, legal costs covered, and a formal warning on their records. I exhaled, the weight of years lifting as I stepped into the courthouse lobby, snow swirling outside. Karen shook my hand, her grip firm. "You didn't just win, Claire. You rewrote their story." I nodded, the binder under my arm lighter now, its pages no longer a burden but a shield. The bank called that afternoon, confirming a full refund of the $750. I leaned back in my chair, the city's hum beyond my window a song of victory. I walked home through slushy streets, my boots steady on the ice. The apartment waited, its silence not just deserved but earned. I'd fought not for revenge but for truth, and the truth had set me free. Emily's lies, Mom's complicity, Dad's dismissal. They were no longer my chains. I was Claire, not their shadow, and the courtroom had proven it. The fight wasn't over, but the battle I'd won was mine to keep, a foundation for the life I was building, brick by brick. 3 days after the verdict, I stood in my kitchen, the morning light soft on the counter where my binder once sat. Tom, still crashing on my couch, stirred under a quilt, his snores a gentle rhythm in the apartment's new peace. He'd said little since Emily left, just a quiet, "finally," before sleep claimed him. I sipped reheated coffee, its steam curling like a question answered. I felt no guilt, no regret, only a stillness that fit me like a tailored coat. The apartment, once a cage, was now a sanctuary, every creak and hum mine to cherish. A week later, a letter arrived, Emily's handwriting unmistakable on the envelope. Inside, a photo of us as kids under a Christmas tree, her small arms around my neck. I stared at our smiles, her trust in me a memory that stung. On the back, I wrote, "You let go first," and held the photo over a candle. The flame licked the edges, the image curling to ash in the sink. I washed the remnants down the drain, the water's rush a cleansing I'd earned. Emily's attempt at guilt couldn't touch me now. I'd outgrown her traps. Months passed, spring thawing Chicago's icy grip. My parents sent no calls, no texts, not even a birthday card. Their silence was a gift, freeing me from the need to explain myself. I opened my fridge, every item mine, no longer shared with a thief. The sofa, the view of the skyline, they were new, not in form, but in feeling, unburdened by expectation. One May afternoon, an email from Lena, Emily's old friend, flickered on my screen. "She's lost her job again. You ruined her life." I read it once, my finger hovering, then pressed delete. Caring didn't mean going back. I ran into Dad at a gas station in June, the pump's hum filling the awkward air between us. He looked smaller, his hair grayer, his excuses spent. "You look good, Claire," he said, eyes on the ground. "Your mom's still mad, says you ruined Christmas." I raised an eyebrow, the irony sharp. "Funny. She started it with 'don't come,' and I listened." He sighed, grasping for words. "Families fight, Claire. You fought for Emily, not me." I let the silence answer, my car keys cool in my hand. I drove away, the rearview mirror empty, peace settling in my chest like a long-held breath released. 2 weeks ago, a package arrived, with no sender listed. Inside, a photo of me with Natalie, Emily's 6-year-old daughter, from years back. She was 4 then, giggling on my shoulders, her hands on my cheeks. A note in shaky crayon read, "I'm sorry for how my mom treated you. Thanks for everything, Natalie." My eyes blurred, tears falling as I traced her words. I didn't know how she found me. Maybe Evelyn, maybe chance. But her kindness was a light I hadn't sought. I tucked the photo in a drawer, not as a tether to pain but a reminder. Love endures, even when you walk away. I'm not vengeful. I didn't set out to break my family, only to stop breaking myself. Emily's lies thrived because I absorbed their cost. But when I stopped, their world unraveled. Not because I tore it down, but because I left. This wasn't punishment. It was freedom, the kind that comes when you choose yourself over a system that trades love for debt. Natalie's note proved it. Walking away doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start loving yourself more. My apartment's silence is my anthem now, powerful, unknown, and wholly mine. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond my window, a quiet witness to the truth I'd carved from the wreckage of my family's lies. At 32, I'd learned a lesson sharper than any blade. Love isn't a debt you owe forever. For years, I'd poured myself into Emily, Mom, and Dad, believing sacrifice was loyalty, that my worth lay in what I gave. But their betrayal, Emily's theft, their dismissal, showed me love can't thrive on conditions. I'd shrunk to fit their needs, my dreams deferred, my identity stolen, until I chose myself. Changing the locks, facing them in court, burning that photo, they weren't acts of spite, but of survival. Natalie's note, her small hand reaching through the pain, taught me that walking away doesn't sever love. It reclaims it for yourself. I'm no longer the shadow who paid their bills, nor the daughter begging for a place at their table. I'm Claire, whole in my silence, free in my boundaries. The lesson isn't bitter. It's radiant. You don't owe anyone your soul. You owe yourself the courage to live unbound, to love fiercely, starting with you.